Hi everybody and welcome to today's virtual art session. As always, lovely to be here and talk you through this art process. My name is Emma Morrissey and I do several of these art sessions for Creative Wellness Journey. So today I'm going to be talking to you how to best use colour pencils. Now these can be any brand of pencils you have and any sketch book paper that you have to hand, which will be perfect. As always, I'll make sure you have the link to the image. So we're going to draw a rose today, so a little bit of a botanical drawing. So first things first, I want to talk to you a little bit about pencils. Now, as I said, it doesn't matter what sort of brand you're using. Some of the more basic, sort of known as sort of student brands will work well. You've probably seen these in different art shops and online as well. Basically, the thing to know with colour pencils is depending on the brand will depend on how much pigment is in the pencil, and sometimes you might get a really sort of intense, vivid colour when you sort of draw with it, and some will be a little bit waxier in texture. But even some of the waxier, more basic ones, you can still get quite a lot of usage out of. So I'm going to give you some top tips on that today. I'll make sure, as always, that you have the link available for the image, which is from pixabay.com, and I usually always talk about them in these sessions because it's brilliant to try and use royalty-free images. So I'll make sure that you have that so that you can draw along with me. So one of the top tips I would say is with the pencils that you've got, make sure you've sharpened them quite well. This will help you to get the best sort of mark that you need. And first things we're going to do is just do a little bit of a sort of test on the colour. So even though the image we're going to do is red, I'm going to use blue just to show you, and that way I won't blunt the sort of more red tone colours that we're going to need later on. So first thing, and I've mentioned this in some other sessions as well, is you want to think about the pressure and where you're holding the pencil. Okay, so if we hold sort of near the tip of the pencil, we can get a more intense, vivid colour. Hold it up a little bit so that you can see. And then if I hold it sort of midway point of the pencil, you'll see it gets much lighter now. Of course, that's because you can't put as much pressure through the pencil, so therefore the mark that you're making will be lighter. If I hold it right at the end here, it gets even lighter still. Okay, so one of the things that's always good to remember when you're drawing and sketching and just sort of practicing is to think whereabouts you're holding the pencil as you begin to draw. And there are different ways that you can start to apply and blend colour. This is one way. You can just sort of go down and then go back up and do that several times. Another good way is you can actually sort of do a circular motion like this. And what this does is whenever you start to sort of colour in, so to speak, what you're doing is you're breaking down that pigment and you're covering the surface of the paper. So sometimes you might hear a paper surface being referred to as a paper tooth. Now what that means is basically that you're just covering everything so that you can't see any of the graininess of the paper underneath. Obviously that will vary depending on what type of paper you're using. Different sketch paper will be a different thickness. Some are very, very thick. This is mixed media paper that I'm using, and this is ideal for all sorts of mediums like watercolour, graphite pencils, pastels, so it is quite thick. But some more basic sketch paper will be a little bit thinner than this and will be a little bit smoother. So when you touch the paper, you'll feel a sort of texture to it. And that will give you a good indication of how much you might need to try and cover that sort of graininess when you're sketching. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to have a look at the image. Now I've got it on my phone here. I'm just going to do sort of a little basic sketch of this, but I'm going to talk you through it as we go along, and I'm going to go for the different reds. And a good little tip, if you're looking at this on a screen or if you've printed it out, is just hold up some of the different colours you've got and see if you can match them. Because often we'll look at something, we think, oh, maybe it's got one tone of colour, and you might find it's got several. So I can see these are sort of some good colours. There's also obviously some variants of green in this as well. So that's one of the first things to do, is just to try and match all of the different colours that you're going to need. And just have these set up ready. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start sort of clockwise. We're going to start at the top and work our way around. Okay, now you can feel free to use just an ordinary sort of sketching HB pencil to do an outline if you wish, but I'm going to go in with one of my sort of red pencils. And I'm just going to start at the top here and work my way around. And what I'm doing is I'm darting my gaze backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, trying to get some of the basic shapes in. I'm not going to worry too much about some of the detail at this stage, because obviously I can build that as we go. So as I said, I'm sort of doing a clockwise sort of motion here, just getting some of the basic lines I can see in place. Okay, it's a little bit light, so I'll hold it up just so you can see. I'm just going to keep building that up. Okay, I'm just going to place this here. And then one of my other tips is, obviously when we did the sort of little pressure mark making test just now, you want to also be doing that when you're drawing, as this will really help you to get different tones from one particular colour pencil that you're using. So you could potentially do this whole sketch just with one pencil if you wanted to, because obviously the more pressure you apply by going near the tip of the pencil and then moving up, you'll get lighter and darker tones of colour. So you don't have to have a huge variety of colours to get a lovely effect. Alright, so I'm just working on the middle at the moment. Again, looking at the image as I go. So as I said, remember to sort of dart your gaze backwards and forwards constantly. Because what this does is this helps you to keep perspective of the piece that you're working on. So at the moment what I'm doing is I'm just getting an idea for the basic overall tone. So when we talk about colour, you might have heard of something called colour harmony. Now these are usually colours and tones of colours that really harmonise and work well together. So you know, you might have heard of sort of like a red orange or an orangey yellow. These sort of tones work really well. And then you might have heard of contrasting colours. Now these are colours that don't traditionally go well together, and they sort of clash, and obviously they stand out a lot because of that. So whenever we're drawing or painting anything, it's always good to think of the colours that you're using, especially if you happen to be doing sort of a more unique piece where maybe you're not working from a reference. Alright, so I'm just building this up a little bit at a time. As I said, you can always sort of add, you can always add more detail as you go along. A rose is usually a shape which a lot of people find quite difficult because obviously there's lots of curves and there's lots of different tones, and to make it look sort of quite delicate can be quite sort of tricky when you're not used to it, but it's definitely a good exercise to do when you start drawing, because you want to start doing some still life drawings, you want to start doing some botanicals, and this really helps build your observational skills as well. Right, so I've got all sort of the basic overall colour here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go in with some sort of darker colours and just sort of bring out some of these tones which I know are much darker. Sort of here, for example, where we can see some sort of shade areas. So I'm just going to start to press a little bit harder, so I'm really sort of focusing all my attention on this particular bit. Often also when you're doing a piece, you'll find that sometimes you don't actually start to see it come to life until you put in those final details near the end. So if you find that you're doing a piece and you think this doesn't look right, this doesn't look like it's supposed to, don't panic, because often it won't look at all like it's supposed to until quite far on in the process, and this is quite normal. Many artists do sort of spend a lot of time sort of working and reworking one particular area of a piece that they're doing, and it won't be until quite far down in the process that they start to see it come to life. Right, so you can see I'm pressing quite hard now because I want to get a much sort of richer colour. I'm going to move back to my red. I'm going to press really hard here now. So I want some of these tones to really stand out. But you notice I didn't put in these strong tones straight away. I'm putting them in now. So as I said, what you can do is just get some of the overall tones in first, and then just work them in richer, deeper as you go along. Just going to keep building this up a little bit more. And there's a little bit of purple in there as well, just a little bit. And there's also some quite dark sort of lines in here, so I'm going to start to put these in a little bit more using a dark brown. I'm not going to go straight in with black because I think that might be a little bit too intense. So I'm going to go in with a dark brown, and just to give a little bit more emphasis to some of these really quite dark, harsher lines. It will also help to sort of give a little bit of an outline, because obviously this rose is set to a black background. So I'm going to outline it because of that. And again, remember, this is just a little experiment, so something that you're, you might be quite new to, something you might not have actually drawn before. And as I said, it will probably take a little bit of practice sometimes when you're new to doing these sorts of things. But you can see just by adding an outline and doing a little bit more shading on some of these lines really does make such a difference, and you start to see it sometimes almost literally appear before your eyes. All right. I'm going to put in some of the green, some of the green stem in now. Okay, and this bit of green here is almost really sort of camouflaged by the sort of petal of the rose on top of it. So I'm going to start to just make that a little bit darker using the dark brown, because we can't really see that very well. So I'm just going to make that a little bit darker. And just keep building it up a little bit at a time. We're nearly there. There's also a little bit, as I said just now, we've got a little bit of purple, we've got a teeny tiny little bit of like a purpley blue, I think particularly on this little bit which is highlighted here. So I'm going to put a little bit of blue just in here. It will be very subtle, you'll barely notice it, but it will make a bit of a difference to the sort of overall tone in that particular area. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is just go in with final little amounts of black. Now there are many artists that won't use the colour black because it can be too definite and too bold. So they might use just lots and lots of different tones of brown, or sort of a grey tone, because it's not as bold as black, but sometimes just a little bit here and there really does make a difference. Just got to use it quite lightly. Again, as I said, you want to dart your gaze backwards and forwards all the time, because that really does help build your observational skills. It helps you keep perspective, especially if you are staring at something for a certain length of time, because you will find that sometimes you can lose perspective on those things. But as I said, one of the best ways to attempt at drawing a rose is to sort of do a clockwise motion with it, and that really does help. Alright, so I'm going to do just final little bits now. I'm going to go in with my dark brown, just because I want this to look a little bit more three-dimensional. So when we start to add shade and maybe highlight some areas in a drawing, this is what makes it look 3D. If we keep it all one tone, it does look quite flat, and obviously we want it to look as realistic as we can. And also the good thing about sort of darting your gaze backwards and forwards is you're constantly then able to check, do I need to add anything? Do I need to change anything? So it's about sort of sometimes looking at the area that you've just done and thinking, is that area dark enough? Is that area bright enough? Do I need to add more colour to that area? And as I said, the more you do that, the more you get used to it, the more confident you will become in the choices you make when you're drawing, and sort of adding more to something or taking something away, or even rubbing something out completely and starting again. You'll get more confident the more that you do it. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop there. All right, just a little basic introduction for you on drawing a rose. Okay, I hope you found this helpful and enjoyable, and hopefully I will see you soon for another virtual session.